Don't mind the fact that I look a little bit disheveled. I had 2 wild nights in a row, and by wild, what I mean is that I left the house 2 nights in a row. One of the nights I was actually performing with my band, Ghost of a Girl, and the footage is on YouTube. I will link it somewhere, either in this video or in the description or both, if you want to check that out. But that is not what this video is about. This video is going to be a writing vlog. My last writing vlog was kind of just one long video for one writing session, me rambling about some of the changes that I was and still am going through. This writing vlog is going to be a series of clips as I go about drafting not 1 but 2 romantasy stories. I don't really write romantasy, I write high epic fantasy. Like, there is romance in my books, but it's not the main plot. It's much more of a subplot, although I do love writing it. And I actually do enjoy reading romantasy too. My favorite kind of fantasy is always going to be a high epic fantasy, a story where a hero is on some kind of quest or adventure or journey, and a story that's so much more about the world and about the politics and about the thrill ride that you go on while you read said story. I'm not putting down romantasy. I enjoy romantasy. I just finished Fourth Wing actually, and I really enjoyed it. But it's not my main genre. That said, I am writing 2 romantasy short stories right now. And the reason being is because in my book series, in the Sun and Moon Saga, there is 2 romantic subplots, at least at this point there's 2. One of them starts at the very, very end of the Misfit Princess and then really develops throughout the Rebel Coven, and then that one continues to develop in the Near Impossible Quest, but it also is joined by another romantic subplot, and it's all kind of one big romantic subplot. It's a love triangle. Don't watch these videos if you don't want like any spoilers. I'm gonna try to keep it relatively spoiler free, but if you want to go into the Sun and Moon Saga like totally not knowing what happens in it, like definitely just go order your copy now, or if you've already purchased it and it's sitting in your TBR pile, go read it now instead of watching this video. I'm gonna try to keep this relatively spoiler free, but I am gonna be rambling about a lot of stuff related to the Sun and Moon Saga and related to these subplots that occur in Aurora and Luna, or this subplot that occurs in Aurora and Luna. Because the story that I am currently writing, the one that I just started in these last couple weeks, is actually a short story, a short romantasy story told from the perspective of Zale, a rebel warlock, and also Princess Aurora's best friend. Well, he wasn't her best friend when she was Princess Aurora. He only becomes her best friend after she leaves the castle and runs away from home and joins the Rebel Coven. Again, don't watch this video if you don't want like any spoilers at all. So this story is from the perspective of Zale, and it's during the time that the Rebel Coven takes place in. And it's basically Zale's perception of everything that's happening. But my intention is for it to be a short story. It's not going to be like a whole other novella. It's not even going to be a novelette. It's going to be a short story. I hope, anyway. I'm really going to try to keep my word count minimal. Because the thing is like, this is meant to be a story that you could read after you've read the Rebel Coven as bonus material for people who either love Zale and ship Aurora and Zale together. Zorora, I call them. I didn't come up with that term actually. My friend came up with that term for me like a million years ago. But yeah, this story is for people who have already read the Rebel Coven and are a big fan of Zale and Aurora and want to read a romantic short story version of the events in the Rebel Coven from Zale's perspective. Or it's going to be for people who just want more of the world in general, although this story really is written with that romantic lens from Zale's perspective. I mean, the two things Zale cares the most about are the Lunar Revolution and his Lunar Coven, and his feelings for Aurora. So obviously there's going to be elements at play that aren't romance, and I'm not going to be like writing this in like a fan fiction-y way. Like, and by that what I mean is that like I'm not going to be writing this with things that aren't canon. I'm not going to be like adding in romantic scenes or spicy scenes that wouldn't be there, and there's going to be no spice in this. Or if there is like anything even remotely spicy, it's going to just be in Zale's mind. But I really don't want my work to be overly spicy, just because I want it to be accessible to teens, even though I am writing it for like people. I'm really writing it for people who are now adults and grew up with things like Harry Potter and are now wanting like a high fantasy series with maybe some themes that go a little bit deeper or are explored in like a little bit more of like a gray and less black and white way. That's why I always say this series is kind of like a bridge between Harry Potter and A Song of Ice and Fire, because it's not as heavy and it's not as like adult as A Song of Ice and Fire, but it's also not a children's book. It's somewhere in the middle. Now, where was I going with this? Oh my god. Right, so I don't want there to be much, if any, spice in my books. I've decided. For a while I was debating it, but I just think that this series could really be enjoyed by teens, and I want to keep it open for that and not be limited to an adult readership because of some spice scenes. So when I say I'm writing a romantasy short story, it's really more like about the romance than it is about like spicy stuff. Not that I'm against that. I just finished Fourth Wing and I loved the spice in that. But it's just not what I want to write. All this is to say, this is meant to line up with the Rebel Coven. This is meant to be canon. It's not meant to be fan fiction, but I am writing it for people who are a big fan of Zale and who ship Aurora and Zale together. So it is going to have a little bit more of a romantic feel to it than the main books in the series. I feel like the risk in writing this is that I'll overwrite, I'll do too many words, and it'll be just too long for what it is. I really think I need to limit my word count on this one and make it a short story, not a novelette, because the reality is it's meant for somebody who's already read this. So if you've already read this, you already know what happens in it, and the whole point of reading this short story is to just get deeper insight into what Zale's thinking and feeling. I also think I'm just going to release this one to my Lunar Coven, aka my Patreon, and my paid Substack tier. I am probably going to put this one behind a paywall because it's not really meant for a new reader. When I post a short story for free, the idea of posting it for free is to get a new reader. It's to invite a new reader into New Camelot. But this really isn't for that. This is like more like something for someone who's already a reader. This is for somebody who's already engaged in the world, already engaged in the story, who just wants more. So I think it would be the perfect thing for my Patreon and my paid Substack tier. So yeah, I really am writing this for people who are already into the main books and for people who have already read the Rebel Coven. Now, one of the reasons why I wanted to write this is just because I thought it would be fun. And I do plan on writing, because I think I mentioned it's going to be 2 short stories. Sorry, I'm very rambly today. It's going to be 2 short stories, one from Zale's perspective from the time of the Rebel Coven, and then also one from another character's perspective. This is where you should leave if you don't want spoilers. From Aiden's perspective from the time of the Near Impossible Quest. Aiden is a character that you will meet in the Near Impossible Quest, which will come out this spring. That's the 3rd installment in Aurora and Luna. Yeah, I want to do another short story, another short romantasy story from Aiden's perspective. And maybe even another short story from Zale's perspective during the time of the Near Impossible quest. Part of the reason why I want to do this is just because I love these characters. They feel like real people to me. They feel like friends to me, and also I'm kind of writing these characters for my inner teenager, because Zale and Aiden, like, just to be TMI, they're both like archetypes of men that I have historically developed feelings for. Zale is kind of that like sensitive, quiet, emo guy, and that's usually the kind of guy that I've actually fallen in love with or had like real feelings for. But Aiden is the kind of guy that, like, I don't want to say like that I'm attracted to, because Aiden is a 17-year-old boy. Is he 17 or is he 16? I have to look that up. I think he's 17. But I digress. He is that archetype of that like overly confident, like loud, like Han Solo, Jesse Pinkman type energy. And that's not the kind of person that I've actually like developed feelings for and like fallen in love with, but it's the kind of person that when I see them in a movie or read about them in a book or just experience them from afar, like maybe, like to throw out another one of my like celebrity crushes, I have a huge crush on Anthony Kiedis from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. That kind of like hyper masculinity, like let's just say a part of me is really into that. Not so much in real life, but in fantasy. So like basically, oh my god, this is so personal, but basically what I'm trying to say is that I'm writing, like the reason why I wanted to get started writing these Romantasy shorts is because it just feels good to my inner teenager, because I get to write short stories about these boys who are of the archetypes of guys that I find attractive and that a lot of women find attractive. I get to write short stories about them falling in love with my main character, who is a little bit of a self-insert. I'm not gonna lie. I know that's frowned upon, but hey, write what you know. I mean, she's more like a younger version of me. Again, I think that's pretty normal, actually. I know it's kind of frowned upon, but I think it's very, very natural and normal to write a self-insert character, or a self-insert character that's just kind of like a younger version of you. So yes, I have been wanting to write these short stories just partially for personal fulfillment, because as I said, it kind of like heals my inner teenager, because when I was younger, I would fantasize about having romances or affairs with these kinds of boys, and so it just feels good, you know? And I really enjoy writing the subplots, the romantic subplots to Aurora and Luna and the Sun and Moon Saga. Like, it's not the main part of the book. As I said, the books in the Sun and Moon Saga are not romantasy, they are high epic fantasy, but I do enjoy a romantic subplot. I just kind of prefer it most of the time to take a backseat to the high epic fantasy or to the adventure. But beyond just wanting to do this for my own personal enjoyment, I also think this is a good writing exercise for me, because the next book in the Sun and Moon Saga, which I plan to I plan to continue drafting during the second half of 2025, after the Near Impossible quest is out, after all the installments to Aurora and Luna out. So Aurora and Luna is the first book in the Sun and Moon Saga. The Misfit Princess, the Rebel Coven, and the Near Impossible quest, those are the 3 acts to Aurora and Luna, and I'm releasing them all individually because they're all long enough to be books on their own, and it's just how I wanted to publish, although I do plan on releasing a special edition of the entire book afterwards. I don't know if I'll do that for the next book, but it's been a really good way to get started in publishing, because it's like baby steps, right? Because I'm an anxious person and I procrastinated publishing for so long, completely due to fear. Anyway, all that's to say, Aurora and Luna is the first book in the Sun and Moon Saga, and then the next book, The Solar Queen, I've already started writing it, but I've stopped, and I've started and stopped many times, and I've always gotten a bit stuck. And it's not just that I've gotten stuck, it's also that I knew I wasn't finished with Aurora and Luna, so I knew I should go back and finish it before I write the next one. And but the plan, of course, after I publish all of Aurora and Luna, is to get into drafting the Solar Queen. The Solar Queen is going to be multi-POV. So Aurora and Luna is pretty much entirely from Aurora's perspective, except for the prologue, which is from the perspectives of 3 different characters. But Aurora and Luna, other than the prologue, is from Aurora's perspective. It's 3rd person limited. So for all of the book, aside from the prologue, you're only getting Aurora's perspective. But in the Solar Queen, that's going to change. I won't say why that's going to change, because it's going to be too many spoilers. But there's a reason why that's going to change. A very good reason. I won't say who all of the perspectives are going to be, because I'm not entirely sure yet. But I will say that there will be a perspective from Zale, and there will be a perspective from Aiden. And of course, there will be a perspective from Aurora. That will be the main perspective. It'll probably be mostly Aurora, but there will be chapters from Zale and Aiden's perspective sprinkled in throughout. That's my very, very rough plan. Anyway, I might end up having more of Zale and Aiden. I don't know. I haven't created an outline yet. I just have a very loose sketch of what the plot's going to be. So I think it'll just be the odd chapter will be from Zale or Aiden. But all that is to say, I think writing these short stories, one from Zale and one from Aiden, it'll be helpful because, as I said, Aurora is a bit of a self-insert, so it's easy to write Aurora. It's natural. I can do it it just feels like it's my own thoughts. It's what I would think in any given situation, or at least it's what younger me would think in any given situation. But Zale and Aiden, while yes, they do feel like real people, and while yes, they do feel like they're my friends, they are different from me. They are very, very different from me. So I think it's kind of a cool opportunity that I feel inspired to write these stories for my own personal enjoyment as well, because it's going to be a good learning opportunity for me to figure out how to write from Zale and Aiden's perspective, because I really have to start using my love of psychology, and more specifically armchair psychology, like Myers-Briggs and the Enneagram and all that, to really ponder how these characters think. Zale thinks in some ways similar to Aurora, but in other ways very, very differently from Aurora. And Aiden thinks in some ways similarly to Aurora, but in other ways very, 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 very differently from Aurora. And Zale and Aiden are almost, I think they are polar opposites. I think Zale, I've pegged him as an ISTJ, introverted sensing, thinking, judging. And Aiden I've pegged as an ESFP. So I guess they're both sensors, as in they prefer to take in information through their senses rather than through their intuition. But yeah, Aiden and Zale are polar opposites. Zale is very serious and very committed to, they're both committed to their causes, but they're committed in different ways. And yeah, they just have very different inner workings in their mind. And I think it's going to be a very interesting creative exercise to just write a short story from their perspectives. The plot's already been figured out because I'm just writing what's happened in the book so far, just from their perspectives. So it's going to be relatively easy to write in that sense. It's just a matter of okay, how would they experience this? So for Zale's story, I started it a few weeks ago. I've written about 1,562 words. I think some of these words are going to have to go, but I'm going to let myself figure that out in revision. Naturally, I am writing kind of from an outline because, as I said, the plot's already set in stone, because I'm just writing the events that happened during the Rebel Coven from Zale's perspective. I've been working my way through reading my own book, which is a little odd, but also kind of fun. Because it's kind of fun to see your work in print and read it. But I've been reading it and making notes on the things that happen in this that I want to include in the story. Some of them won't be included really at all because some of them are just from, like some of the things are just from Aurora's perspective, like her training with Professor Owl one-on-one, like, or her seeing, like, there's I won't give too many spoilers away, but there's just like a huge scene where her and Zelina are basically talking for an entire chapter. Just her and Zelina. That doesn't need to be in Zale's story. I mean, obviously, this conversation has an impact on the plot of the Rebel Coven, and that impact will be in Zale's story, but you know what I mean? So it's not like everything is getting put in this short story, but I'm reading through it and making notes on what needs to go in there, and I'm about halfway through. I mean, I was hoping that I would finish reading through by today, the day that I was going to get back to drafting this, but I have been super busy and I just have not had the time. So instead, what I'm going to do, because the thing is I can read that book, like I can read it when I'm on the go, and take notes when I'm on the go, but right now it's my day off and I have a big chunk of time. I just did some copy edits for the Near Impossible Quest, just to kind of like warm up my writer's brain. And now what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through the notes that I've made on the Rebel Coven, and I'm going to continue drafting this story. I don't think I'll get as far as I've outlined from the book. Like I think I have enough, like I've taken enough notes to be able to have a good writing session today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on some music that will help me get into Zale's frame of mind. I have a friend, a longtime friend, who Zale is kind of based off of, and this friend is a musician. And whenever I need to get into Zale's frame of mind, I just always listen to his music because his music is very like ambient and there's not any like vocals in it, so I can write to it no problem. I can write to music, it just has to not have vocals, or the vocals have to be very, very distant. So I'm gonna put on my friend's music, try to get into Zale's frame of mind, and continue writing this story, and I will let you know how it all goes. So, I've been writing for, I don't even know, well over an hour now. I've only written about 1,000 words. The story is now sitting at 2,515 words. I'm writing very, very, very slowly because I've got a rough outline started here, but then of course I'm having to go back and kind of reread bits and pieces and decide what do I want to include, what do I want to exclude, and then like once I have the bits figured out that I want to include, I've got to figure out a way to rewrite them from Zale's perspective, adding little details in, and also like making sure it lines up with the main book. So it's very complicated. It's not like writing a normal short story. It's not like writing usually feels. Yeah, it takes a lot of brain power because I just have to make sure that everything is lining up. I am really, really nervous. This is just gonna get like really, really freaking long, and I'm gonna have a whole like novella on my hands. I don't want that. I feel like it's gonna be more satisfying for it to be a short story, something short and sweet that readers can read in like, you know, less than an hour, not something where it's going to be a huge time commitment. But let's see here. I had like 4 pages of notes and I'm only 1 page in, and I'm only halfway through the book. So theoretically I am about 1/8 of the way through. So if I were to keep this sort of average word count all the way through, like, then I would be looking at a 20,000 word book, which would be like half the length of the Rebel Coven. I don't want that. I'm gonna try to be very minimalist as I continue to write this, and I do think that I'm gonna have to edit everything I've written down so far, especially what I wrote before today, because what I wrote before today, it was good, but you know, I probably could have been more economic with my words, but I was just kind of letting myself meander and ramble, and because I was really just experimenting, right? So I can always revise things down, but it's going to be a lot easier if I don't waste a bunch of time writing a bunch of words that aren't going to make it to the short story. Yeah, in my next session, I'm going to try to be really economic with my words. I feel like I was pretty okay today. It's more the first couple sessions I had that were more rambly. So even though I only wrote 1,000 words, I actually got through quite a bit of plot. In a sense, like the less I write in each session, the better I'm doing. Well, the less I write while still moving along in the plot of the Rebel Coven, if that makes sense. Like, I want to write not a lot of words, but I want to accomplish a lot with them. So that's going to be a good exercise in that as well, because I tend to be a wordy writer, which is okay, but I feel like I can always work on being more efficient and economic with my prose. So this is a good exercise, not just in understanding Zale better, but also in becoming just a more efficient writer. It is really weird to write this from Zale's perspective. Well, not weird, I mean, he feels like a familiar person to me, but he feels like a friend to me. He doesn't feel like me, if that makes sense. So it does feel like I'm slipping into the mind of another person, whereas I feel right at home in Aurora's mind because, as I said, Aurora is a bit of a self-insert. She is like a younger version of me, so when I'm writing as her, it's like, oh, it's just easy. It's like I'm going on this adventure. I'm talking to the rebel warlock. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. But now that I'm writing everything I've written from Zale's perspective, it's like I'm really trying to understand my friend. Not my friend in real life that he's based off of, but I mean, the character feels like a friend to me. He is based off of one of my friends, but he's not. They're not one and the same. My friend was just kind of like an inspiration for Zale, but Zale feels like a friend to me, just Zale the character. So, wow, I'm crazy. But my point is, it does feel like there's more distance between me and this character, the amount of access I have, just because, like with Aurora, when I'm writing, like it's natural. I know what she thinks. I know what she feels. It's easy. It's like a knee-jerk reaction that I'm having. But with Zale, it's more like I'm imagining what he's thinking and feeling. And yeah, this is a good exercise in getting to know him. Okay, so I'm going to really try not to repeat myself in this video, or I'll just edit out the parts where I do repeat myself, because it is a week and I think a day since the first bit of footage that you watched. I have still been working on Zale's story. I think I wrote about 1,000 more words since then. Let me see. Okay, so yeah, I think where I left off with you is that I had written about 2,500 words, and then I wrote about another 1,000 words, and then this morning I picked up writing again and I wrote 1,067 words. There's so much on my mind. First off, I just want to say that I did finish reading through the Rebel Coven, and I finished making notes on what it is I need to be writing and how I want to write it. I am really concerned though, because I really stressed in the earlier footage that I want this to be a short story, and I am already sitting at just shy of 5,000 words. I'm sitting at 4,722 words, which is like, it's already long enough to be a short story for sure. And I've only made it through a couple pages of notes, but I have so many notes. Now, it might be that there's a lot of overlap between the notes, because as I was reading, I was writing down literally anything that came to my mind, so I probably wrote down a couple of things twice. I really hope you can't hear that music. It sounds like I definitely know the song that's playing, but I can't think of it. Like something like Destiny's Child, Beyonce, Rihanna, kind of. Anyway, I'm really sorry if you can hear that. I really hope you can't hear that. But basically, what I was trying to say is it might not be that there's actually that much content to put in the story. It might be that I repeated myself in my notes, or I might have written some things down that I decide, I'm not going to include that. Because when I'm brainstorming, I literally just write everything down because I fear, like, what if there's a really good idea, but I lose it because I don't write it down? So I kind of write everything down, even if it's, like, definitely not a good idea, or even if I'm unlikely to use it. But I am a little bit stressed because I'm already just shy of 5,000 words. And if you read the Rebel Coven, you'll know what I'm talking about. The point in the story that I'm at is basically, I haven't even finished the first chapter yet. God. So basically, Zale's story, there's like a few scenes before Aurora wakes up that are completely new because obviously they wouldn't be in the Rebel Coven because the Rebel Coven is told entirely from Aurora's perspective. So there's a few scenes where Zale's like waiting for Aurora to wake up, watching over her. Then I wrote the scene where Aurora does wake up, and I really did dramatize that one. Like I pretty much went in like almost line for line, but wrote Zale's version of it. So that one I could probably edit down, like on a line level. I could probably go and take some of those sentences away because, you know, anyone who's reading this story will probably, hopefully, have already read the Rebel Coven, so they don't need like every little bit of information. I don't think I need to hold the reader's hand really ever, but like especially in this. But that scene was really fun to write. It was really fun to write it from Zale's perspective. And then I left off at that point because I wanted to keep writing the story, but I kind of got stuck because if you've read the Rebel Coven, you'll know that the second half of the first chapter is kind of a montage of like a bunch of different things told in like a narrated way. As the narrator, I'm kind of like telling what's happened, but then using little bits of dramatization sprinkled in, but the events aren't necessarily told in order of how they actually took place. They're told in the order that makes sense to tell in my narration. And that's not usually how I write. I usually write things more in the order that they happen. But for some reason, I remember when I was drafting this chapter, I was like, I'm going to write a little montage of just like little slice of life things that happen as Aurora's getting settled into the Coven. So it's kind of hard to write it because either I kind of write another montage, but Zale's version, or I put everything in order. But the thing is I never had like a set in stone idea of what order those little bits took place in. So my brain is just having a hard time wrapping my head around how I want to tell this part. I think I am going to go with the montage thing, but instead it'll be a narrative that's centered around Zale's experience, of course. So I'm just kind of winging it. This part's probably going to get revised a lot. I'll probably change the order of things. I don't know. I'm kind of stressed about it, but I think if I can just write past this and tell myself I'll deal with it later, I think the rest of the story will be really easy to write. So yeah, I'm going to try to get past this chunk of the story, and then maybe I will talk to you after that. So I think what I need to do is some of these events that happen in the montage, I need to just sum them up in like 1 or 2 sentences, just because while they're good in the book, they're not really that important for Zale's story. They just kind of need to be mentioned, but mentioned as a piece of a narrative that's about Zale. And I don't think I have to use as many words for these as I thought. which is good because at this rate, I'm definitely writing a novelette. So, so either I gotta cut some things down, or I have to accept that I'm writing a novelette, but that's a problem for future Melody to figure out. For now, I just need to write. So I think I wrote about over 1,000 more words. I think I wrote close to like 1,300 more words, maybe even a little bit more than that. I've gotten through the montage now, so that's good. It was very slow writing, and this is kind of what I mean. Like in my last vlog, my last writing vlog, I talked about how like I'm starting to write more slowly now because I'm starting to write a little bit more methodically from the get-go, because like I wrote my first book, Discovery, writing it and basically just sprinting my way through, telling myself I could fix things in revision, and that very quickly became my writing style. But the problem with that is that then I have to do like 10 rounds of revision, and I like revision, but it's also a little bit maddening when you're just like so bogged down in revision and you have to like rewrite the whole thing. Like basically, because I've done so much revision for so many different projects, I'm starting to see where I tend to ignore potential problems in drafts, and I'm starting to draft a little bit more slowly and a little bit more methodically so that I don't have to do as much revision. So it was slower getting started in that writing session, but I think I got it down. I still might change the order of the events a bit just to streamline things. I'm not totally sure. I'm going to have to like take a really good look at it once I have a fresh mind and I haven't just been working on it all day. I'm just grateful that I'm past the montage part of the book and that I can move forward and write things in the order that they were written in the book and not worry about it because the rest of the book is written in chronological order. Right now I am just prepping some tofu for later, for dinner. I need a little bit of a break from writing for just a few minutes, just to reset my mind. I find if I sit too long, I can just start to feel not very good. So yeah, I'm just taking a wee little break and prepping some tofu for tonight's dinner. We're gonna be having a chicken curry soup, but of course it's gonna be chicken because I'm vegetarian. I don't eat chicken, but I do eat tofu baked in the oven disguised as chicken. So I'm just doing this prep work now. I guess I should turn the oven on. That would be helpful. I find breaking from writing, like I try to not do anything that really is going to mentally take me away from my writing. I try to break by doing things like vlogging or like doing a little bit of food prep or making a cup of tea. I try to not go on like social media during my breaks. I try to not watch too much YouTube during my breaks. I might watch a little bit, especially if it's something inspiring, but I just try to not go down any major rabbit holes that are going to pull me away from writing and have me waste half the day. So I might let myself watch a YouTube video, which I just did, but I try to keep it within reason, and I try to just do something that's going to refresh me so I actually go back to my writing feeling refreshed. I am doing like a pretty big writing day today just because I want to. I have an extra day off and this is how I want to spend my time writing. I can't remember if I mentioned this already. Writing these short stories from the perspectives of Zale and Aiden It's gonna be so helpful for the Solar Queen. It's not like I can't write from their perspective. I do understand them as people, but they feel more like friends to me, whereas Aurora feels like a younger version of me and like a different reality. So this is really helpful for me understanding, in this case, who Zale is and like what he thinks about and where his mind goes. I mean, obviously I already have a little bit of that understanding from writing Aurora and Luna, but now I have so much more of an understanding. I'm developing a deeper understanding of Zale. I think he's an ISTJ, and I think he is an Enneagram type 6. He's all about hard work and loyalty. He's very lawful. He's very rule-abiding, which I know sounds funny because he's a rebel. He's an illegal rebel warlock, but he's all about abiding the rules of his rebel coven. He's not about abiding the rules of the monarchy, but he's about abiding the rules of the coven. So that's a little bit of a different psychology than Aurora, which is what I'm used to writing, because Aurora is more about what is right, what is morally and ethically right, whereas Zale is more about just following the coven's rules. Also, I'm in my pajamas because, I don't know, I just have decided that I just want to be myself on the internet. I don't want to try to like be someone I'm not, or be inauthentic, or be disingenuous. When I'm writing at home and when I'm creating at home, I'm not putting on a cute outfit. I'm not doing my makeup. I'm not doing my hair. I'm not showering. Like, I'm just being cozy and comfortable. And what kind of tea do I want? I think I'm gonna have more lavender Lady Grey because it is very good. But yeah, I'm just being myself and just staying cozy, and that's how I find it easiest to focus. Like, if I was wearing a cute outfit right now, I would probably be distracted by how uncomfortable I found wearing that in my house. So yeah, you're probably gonna see a lot of vlogs of me in my pajamas or just in really comfortable, cozy clothes. Because that's just how I actually am when I'm writing. I don't want to put on a performance. When I first showed up on the internet and started sharing my work on the internet, I felt like I had to put on more of a performance, and it just doesn't feel good. It feels good when I'm doing my music to do that. It feels good when I'm reading my work aloud to give a performance, but when I'm just showing you behind the scenes, it feels much better to just show up and just be how I would be if there was no camera here. And how I would be if there was no camera here is I'd be in my cozy pajamas, I'd be in my cozy cardigan robe, my wizard robe, I like to call it. I would just be talking to myself about my story as I made tea, and this is just how it would be, except I'm talking to you, the camera, which really feels like I'm talking to me. I'm making another cup of tea, and then I'm going to get back to my writing. I'm just going to write as much as I can. I don't think I'm going to finish the story today because, well, unless I get really, really good at budgeting my words. But even then, here's the thing, like, budgeting words actually, like, it takes longer to write 500 really well budgeted words than it does to write 2,000 words that meander and go everywhere. If I were to just go like wild with the word count and just write, I might be able to get the whole thing written today, but it would be very sloppy, and there would be a lot that I could probably cut out or revise or just shorten in some way. But it would actually be better to write the story a little bit slower and write it more methodically and try to be more economical with my words, because that is something that as a writer I do struggle with, which is partially just because I prefer a more wordy, poetic style, but it's also because sometimes I think I'm just, I don't know, sometimes I think I could get to the point a little bit more quickly. Not all the time. As I said, I like that sort of more old-fashioned writing style, but yeah, the point here is that, I mean, this might end up being a novelette. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure. But I would like to write it in as few words as possible while still having it be accurate to the book, and also while still having it do what it's supposed to do, which is give the readers that are a fan of Zale and a fan of Zerora, give them something more to enjoy. So it might be a novelette. And I wouldn't hate that, because, you know, this is a short story that's for, it's for the fans anyways. It's for people that have already read it and enjoyed it. It's not going on my website for free for everybody. It's for the people who have already read the Rebel Coven and enjoyed it and loved it and just want more. That said, I wrote a novelette last year, The Fisherman and the Mermaid. I put it up for free and I loved doing it. I don't regret doing it at all. I loved doing it, but it was just such a huge time commitment that I realized that if I'm going to do that, I do have to sell the story. I can't just put it on my website for free. Which I guess is fine for Zale's story, because I will be selling this one. I'll be putting it on my Patreon and my Substack at the paid tier. So I guess that's fine. It just makes it a much bigger time commitment for editing. Is okay, but it might mean that I don't get it out as quickly, and I'd love to have it out before the Near Impossible quest comes out. I'd love for it to already be there so that, you know, readers who are reading the series can see, oh my gosh, there's this story. It's from Zale's perspective. I'm a huge fan of Zale. I'm going to join her Patreon or her Substack so that I can read this. I want more. I finished the Near Impossible quest. Who knows when the Solar Queen's coming out? But there's these short stories here on her Patreon and Substack, and I'm going to join that. So I'd like to have it done by then. And I think that's manageable. I just have a lot of different projects on the go right now, and sometimes that's hard for my brain, because I have the kind of brain where I really like to dive deep into one thing at a time, and I struggle to switch between tasks, or like even if I know that I have like an unfinished thing over here, like it just makes it harder to focus because I know I have something to do. But at the same time, like if I were to only work on one project at a time, I don't know if that would be, well, maybe that would be a more effective way to work. I don't know. I'm still experimenting and figuring out the best way for me to work. I will say this though. I've been doing some serious thinking about when I get to drafting the sequel to Aurora and Luna, The Solar Queen. And I think that for that book, I am very much going to have to only be drafting that while I'm drafting, because there's a lot of different plot lines and subplots and things that all have to kind of come together, and I think it's just going to take like all of my brain power. So I think during the second half of the year, when I start, or when I get back to working on that, I think I am just going to have to kind of focus and just draft that. But then I also have to still be doing promotion for the books that I already have out. It's just a lot. Sometimes I feel so scatterbrained and overwhelmed. But I also, like, I love what I'm doing and I love what I'm working towards, so it all feels so worth it to me. But I'm still figuring out, okay, like how can I do the copy edits for my first novel, and how can I draft my second novel, and how can I write all these short stories, and how can I record this album with my boyfriend and do everything all at once while still sleeping and eating. Thank you for listening to that little tangent. I appreciate it. It's nice to have a little bit of a rant sometimes. I do this to myself though. I really have to say, like, I am a very creative person and a very busy person, and no one is making me do this except for me. I do this work because I love it, not because someone is holding a gun to my head and telling me I have to write the Sun and Moon Saga. Hit 10K 7K in this short story, and that is not a word count that I thought I would be hitting. I really thought this could be like a 5,000 word short story. I thought it would be like a cute slice of life 5,000 word short story. I'd pick my favorite moments between Aurora and Zale. I'd add a few moments of Zale on his own that aren't in the original book. I thought it would just be this cute, short little slice of life story. And it's looking like it's gonna be a novelette. That or I could like really edit it down, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't know, and I won't know until I get into revision. I don't really mind this being a novelette because it isn't for like a new reader. It's for someone that's read Aurora and Luna, or it's at least for someone who's read The Misfit Princess and the Rebel Coven. And it's for someone who loved the books and loved Zale and Aurora specifically, and for someone who just wants more of them together. That said, I am gonna try to cut it down in revision because like there's probably some things in here that don't really need to be in here. Like maybe there's some scenes that could be cut out and maybe they could be replaced with like 1 or 2 lines of internal monologue in Zale's head. There's also probably scenes that could just be cut in half by cutting the word count down, but it's also really tricky because scenes that have already taken place in the Rebel Coven, like long dialogue scenes between, let's say, Aurora and Zale that have already taken place in the Rebel Coven, like, on the one hand, I don't just want to like give you all the dialogue that's in the Rebel Coven because you're probably like, oh my god, like I've already read this, blah, blah, blah. But then also, if I don't do that and like I'm kind of skipping big chunks of dialogue, well, I kind of have to connect them with a bit of internal monologue in Zale's head. And then if there's too much internal monologue in like really any scene in any story, it can feel really passive and really like just bogged down with like not a lot of plot or like things happening. It's not that it's bad to be in the character's head. There's a way to do it where it's really effective. Like it's done really effectively in the Hunger Games, for example. But it can also be done in a very ineffective way. And I know as someone that's an overthinker and as someone that's like very introspective and just spends a lot of time in my own head, which is why I'm making this vlog. That's why I like vlogging, because if I wasn't talking to the camera, I would just be thinking about all this while I brewed another cup of tea, you know what I mean? So as someone that's already like that, I know my writing tends to lean that way, and usually in my revision I have to get myself out of the character's head a little bit and like into what's happening in the sensory world around them. But the problem with that in this story is that if I take the story out of Zale's head, then I kind of just have to regurgitate all the dialogue that's already happened in the Rebel Coven, and I don't want to like bore the reader or like make them feel like, oh, this is just the same book but from Zale's perspective, which like yes, like that is the point of the story, but I just feel like it should be done in a way where you don't feel like you're just reading the same book. Like it should be done in a way where you feel like you're getting more. So this is going to be a tricky one to revise. I'm probably going to take a little break before I get to revising it. I'm probably going to start drafting the next short story before I start revising this one, just to give my brain a break. I don't remember if I told you, but the last day that I worked on this story, I had a 3,000 word writing day. And then today I had a 3,500 word writing day, which is awesome. That is awesome. So I wrote a lot and I got a lot done, but there's still so much more that needs to get done, and I'm really nervous because at this rate, if I keep writing, like, let's see here, because I've got all these notes, right? So at this rate, 1, 2, 3, 4. I've gone through 4 pages of notes and I still have about 4 more pages to go. So if I keep using about the same amount of words for each page of notes, this is going to be like a 20,000 word story, which is too long. That's too long. Ideally, I want it to be under 15K. One second, actually. What's the word limit for a novelette? Let's see here. Okay, so a novelette is 7,500 to 19,000 words. But I think there's a lot of gray area in that, but I don't know. I just think anything more than 15K for this story is going to be overkill. But I don't mind that it's a novelette. Like, I think 10,000 to 15,000 words would be good. As long as it's interesting and as long as I don't feel like I've just copy-pasted the same story. Like, one thing that I really want to get across, and I'm going to be really focusing on this in the revision, is Zale's character arc throughout this story. Now, this is something that I didn't really consider until after my last writing session. So my last writing session for this project went really well. I got a lot done, 3,000 words. That was great. But I felt a little bit confused on the story, on like what the point of it was or where it was all going. Like, I was excited to write the romance, and every time I get to write romantic stuff here, I feel great. But it was like, I felt like there should have been more. And then, not related to this story, but related to outlining Aurora and Luna's sequel, The Solar Queen, because I've started outlining that because I'm going to work from an outline this time around. Long story short, when I drafted Aurora and Luna, I didn't have an outline. I just had like a lot of notes and a lot of ideas, but I mostly discovery wrote that novel. And if I came across a plot hole or a problem or something that needed to be fixed, to avoid getting trapped and held back by writer's block, I would tell myself, oh, you can fix it when you edit it. And I would just sprint past the problem. But what that meant is that I had to revise it like at least 5 times. That was a lot. I don't even know. It might have been more than 5. Like, I always say I rewrote it 10 times. It was probably about 5 times for developmental edits and then 5 times for language-based edits. Ugh, I can't talk. I've had a lot of caffeine. I think I've had like 6 cups of tea today. Wow, I really can't talk. Oh god, I really overdid it on the tea today, but that's because I was having a writing day. Alongside writing 3,500 words, I also did 10 pages of copy edits for Aurora and Luna. But I digress. So I was outlining the Solar Queen because I want to outline the Solar Queen because I don't want to have to revise it 5 to 10 times. I want to create an outline and write from that outline and kind of have a lot of the problems that would arise solved before I start writing. Not that they're all going to be solved. There will, of course, still be problems that I'll have to solve in revision, but I just want to do more of the work up front so I can just enjoy the writing process. I think that's my preferred way of working these days. So I was doing some outlining for the Solar Queen, and I was reading Take Off Your Pants, which I had never read before. And Take Off Your Pants talks a lot about character arcs, and there's just like a whole system to outlining your book in Take Off Your Pants. So to kind of practice using that system and to make sure I understood it, I was using it on a variety of stories I had read, stories I had written, stories I was writing, like Zale's story. And that was when I realized, oh, like, beyond just having this be like a cute romantic story that fans of Aurora can enjoy, this really needs to be a deep dive into Zale's psyche. I really want to tell a story beyond the romance here because there is something going on beyond the romance here. Like, you know, in the book, Aurora and Luna, in the book, The Rebel Coven, Zale has feelings for Aurora, and that's a huge part of the plot. That is the subplot, but also the main plot is that Aurora has to train with these rebels because they want her to go on a quest for them so that they can restore the magic to the peasants of New Camelot. There's this big politically driven plot, and that's the main plot. And I realized that for this story about Zale, it really needs to be about the tension and the internal conflict around these two motivations that Zale's juggling, if that makes sense. I know that sounds a little bit convoluted, but Zale has feelings for Aurora. Zale likes Aurora. And that's obviously driving him because, like, you know, when you have feelings for someone, that almost overrides anything else, especially in these early days of a relationship or a potential relationship. So there's that, and that's strong. That's huge. But also, Zale's under a lot of pressure. Pressure from Zelena, pressure from the Coven, pressure that he puts on himself. He needs to get Aurora on board with the Coven's values, with the way they see the world, with their mission. He needs to awaken Aurora, so to speak, to what's really going on in New Camelot, and he needs to get her on board with their plan so that she'll train and go on the quest. He knows he needs to do that, but then, of course, he also doesn't want to pressure her to do that because he likes her. And he also knows she's the kind of person where if you put a lot of pressure on her, she's just gonna kind of collapse. Like, she's a lot like me. She's very sensitive, and that will just stress her out. Like, I'm the kind of person, if you tell me to do something, I'm just not gonna want to do it. You know what I mean? It's that rebelliousness. Just because she's in the Rebel Coven doesn't mean that Aurora's not gonna try to rebel against the Rebel Coven. Do you know what I mean? So in revision, I will not only be trying to get the word count down, and I will not only be cutting out scenes that don't need to be there, but I'm also going to make sure that this narrative about Zale having these two conflicting motivations, I'm going to make sure that that's in there because I think that's a really important part of this story. Like, yes, we want the romance. Yes, we want the cute romantic little scenes where they're holding hands or, you know, Zale's fantasizing about her. Like, we want all that. We want all that limerence. I love romance. I love limerence. I love all that stuff. I'm a hopeless romantic, and it's fun to write all that, but this needs to be grounded in Zale's character arc because the thing is the Solar Queen, when I write from Zale's perspective, yes, it's going to be romantic, but there's a bigger character arc there. So this short story, like I said in the first clip, this is meant to be canon, so it needs to gel. It needs to read like if Aurora and Luna was multi-POV, it needs to read like these would just be the chapters from Zale. Because even though Aurora isn't multi-POV, and I don't want to make it multi-POV because that book really is about Aurora, the Solar Queen, the next book, and the books going forward will be multi-POV, and yeah, any other story I write that has a perspective from Zale, it needs to feel canon. It needs to feel like you could just take this short story and just plug it in with the rest of the books and it would just glide in there perfectly. So yeah, I don't know if that makes any sense. Thank you for listening to my incoherent rambles. I was hoping I would finish this story today. That was probably wishful thinking, seeing as I still have like half the book to get through. But I'm gonna try to be very, very crafty with my words going forward because there's really no need to retell every single scene. Before I write any scene, I need to ask, how does this scene relate to Zale's character arc? Does it add to it, or, you know, is it kind of more about Aurora's character arc? And if it's more about Aurora's character arc, it can probably be cut. Because you already have the Rebel Coven, you already have Aurora and Luna. This is about going into Zale's psychology and getting some really fun romance along the way. And that's the other thing, too. I think, like, even if you're not a fan of Zerora, like, even if you don't ship Zale and Aurora together, I think this book should still be interesting to someone who doesn't ship Aurora and Zale together. So I think I finished Zale's story. I'm at 14,650 words, so yeah, that seems like a good place to be like, the draft is done. There is a little bit more that I need to write for the ending. There's like another scene that needs to get integrated, but I have this weird thing where I tend to not write my ending until I revise it. I don't know why. I think it's just sometimes I don't quite know what note to end the story on until I've actually read through the story that I've already written, if that makes sense. But yeah, today I wrote 4,600-ish words, which is a lot. That is the biggest writing day I've had in a long, long time. That is a lot of words. For me, anyway. I know some people do 10K days. I've done 10K days in the past. Like when I wrote Aurora and Luna, I binge wrote the second half of that thing. The Near Impossible Quest, the novella that's coming out, like I pretty much wrote that whole part of the story, that half of the story in like, oh God, I don't even know. Like less than 2 months. It was like the only thing I was doing at the time though. I was basically just writing. That's all I was doing. I was living with my parents and I was just writing, and I had other creative projects, but I put them on the back burner and I just binge wrote the story. But generally speaking, I'm not much of a binge writer. Normally I'm gonna do 1,000 words a day or 2,000 words on a good day kind of writer. I prefer to go slow and steady. I prefer to write every day, but not have to write tons and tons of words each and every day. It's just the way I work. And part of that is because I do work 4 days a week at a day job. And I just find that because I'm in that routine, it's easier to write a little bit every day or most days than it is to sit down on the weekend and be like, now I'm going to write 10,000 words. Do you know what I mean? Like, just because on the weekend I'm tired and I need to rest, but I also need to write. It's a lot to manage. But I have been kind of binge writing this story. And part of that is because I do have the outline to work from. I think that when I have something outlined and when I know what it is I'm writing, I am very good at just sprinting through the draft, which is great. I will say I'm also really, really tired. I'm really, really tired today. And the only reason why I focus so hard on this story is just because I wanted to have the draft done. I wanted to have the draft behind me. But I'm feeling really, really tired. I have no idea what I think of the story, which doesn't mean that it's bad. This happens all the time. Or when I'm drafting something, I'm just kind of like, is it good? I don't know. But I'm just kind of feeling that. I think the other day I might have pushed myself too hard, and then today I also pushed myself too hard, and I'm just feeling tired and I want a break, but I have to go back to work tomorrow, and I have a bunch of copy edits to do for the Near Impossible Quest this week, so I'm probably not going to get much of a break. Burnout is real. Fatigue is real. These are real problems that we face. But I have to learn how to make the work that I really want to make and promote the work, and also take care of myself so I have the energy to create the work and share the work. But yeah, I'm just feeling very uncertain about this. I think it could come together really nicely in revision. There's a lot of things in this where I was a little bit bored writing it because it's already mentioned or shown in the Rebel Coven, and I want to take a lot of those moments out as I revise this story, because I think if I'm feeling bored, the audience will feel bored too. And I might just be nitpicking myself. Maybe it's not as boring as I am making it seem in my head, but I also think I don't need to hold the reader's hand in this story. Like, I can trust that you've already read the Rebel Coven. I can trust that you can figure it out. Like, I just need to trust that the reader doesn't need their hand held. And I think that's going to be the main thing that I do in revision, is like trusting that you don't need your hand held and that you'll be able to figure out what's going on. Just because, yeah, there was a lot of parts where I was writing, but I was like, do I really need to be writing this? It's already in the Rebel Coven, and if it's not relevant to Zale's character arc, and if it's not relevant to Zale and Aurora's romance, then I think I'm going to have to cut it. So we'll see where the word count is sitting after that. But at this point, it's going to be a novelette, And yeah, I am going to end the vlog here though. I think this has gone on long enough and I will not take you along with me into revision. At the beginning of the vlog, I said that I was going to be drafting a story from Zale's perspective and a story from Aiden's perspective. And I am still going to be writing that story from Aiden's perspective. But when I started vlogging and writing, I thought I would jump between the two. But what I found is that it was easier to deep dive into Zale's psychology, and I just wanted to focus on drafting this one story rather than bouncing between the two of them. And then I'll probably do the same thing for Aiden's story. When I'm writing that, I'll probably just be writing that and not be writing like a story from Zale's perspective or whatever. Because this was like a really good exercise in character. This story, it did help me understand my character better. And I spent a lot of time over these last few weeks just thinking about Zale as a character, because using my tools, using Myers-Briggs, he's an ISTJ, and using the Enneagram, he's an Enneagram type 6. So he's very hardworking, he's very loyal, he's very disciplined, takes himself very seriously. He has a set of morals, he has like a moral compass or a set of values that he really adheres to, and he's a very no-nonsense kind of person, and that's not really how I am as a person. I mean, there's things I have in common with that, but it's very, very different. The main thing is that he just takes himself so seriously, and I'm not really used to that. I mean, I do take myself seriously, but not as seriously as someone like Zale. Because I'm still willing to be goofy, and I don't know, I don't think that I know everything, but someone like Zale does think that they know everything. So it was interesting to put myself in that psychology. It was a really interesting exercise, and I do think it will be really helpful for when I get to drafting the Solar Queen. And I think it's going to be the same thing with Aiden's. I did really enjoy writing the romance, and I'm excited to make the romance even more romantic when I do the developmental and line edits. I think I'm going to have to read a romance book when I'm editing this, just to like keep myself in that mindset, or I'll just have to write the story at certain parts of my cycle, because how romantic and other things I feel at any given time really depends on where I'm at in my cycle, and it really goes from being like almost non-existent to being like overwhelmingly there, if that makes sense. This is so TMI. So I think that I will either want to time when I'm editing this to those parts of my cycle, or I'll want to like read a romance novel just to like put myself into that romantic mood, you know what I mean? Because I really do want to play up the romance, and that is something that Zale as a character just puts a lot of thought into, like a lot more than Aurora. Aurora is romantic, but she's kind of a bit too young and innocent to like fully surrender to the romance. And this is spoilers, but near the end of the Rebel Coven, she even says that she never thought she would ever fall in love with a Fulkian. And she starts to get confused about her feelings for Zale. So she's more like on the fence about it, whereas Zale is like, he is serious about Aurora. So I really do want to play up the romance in the story, not just because I know a lot of people ship Zale and Aurora together, but also because that's just what's on Zale's mind. So it's accurate for him as a character, because I'm writing in third person limited. So I'm basically writing from his perspective, but in third person. So it's more accurate to focus on the romance. But then, as I said, I also need to thread in his character arc. So there's going to be a lot to do in developmental edits, and I'm stressed about it. But this is where I'm going to end the vlog. I've rambled at you long enough. Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't yet read The Misfit Princess and the Rebel Coven, there will be links in the description where you can order your copies, and all my other links will be in the description as well. I highly encourage you to order your copy of The Misfit Princess and the Rebel Coven now, because the Near Impossible quest will be coming out fairly soon. I don't know when this vlog is going up. Surely this vlog is going up before the Near Impossible quest is coming out, but the Near Impossible quest is on the way, and you want to be all read up on the Sun and Moon Saga so that you're ready to embark on the Near Impossible quest with Luna and Sail. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will talk to you in the next video. Bye!